Hi and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll show you how to repair your door side mirror turn signal light with these models 2000 to 2000 to 2006 Mercedes-Benz models with this light. It's often the case that the LED lights, some or all of them, will stop working. Granted, these cars are now very old, 14, 15 to 20, 21 years old, and the housing itself has well, before I get to that, there's a clip that with a long screwdriver you have to move up or down depending on where it is. It's either in the bottom of the mirror inside the housing or on top, but don't worry, I will show you in detail a little later in the video where exactly it is. In some models it's on top and some models in the bottom, and I've skipped everything else up to this point here, getting this the lamp part of it out. Don't worry about that either. I'll show you as you put this back together. You'll know exactly what to do to take it apart, to remove it in the first place. So as I was mentioning before, the housing has this piece in it. You cannot get this part alone. You can probably from eBay used, but then you don't know when they're gonna go bad. The housing, I think Mercedes sells them as of June of 2021 for $333 or more. So if your LED bulbs are have stopped working, some or all of them, usually what happens is it's kind of erratic and random. They may work, sometimes they may not. You get the turn signal error in the dash, and it gets kind of annoying because you don't know if it's your battery or if it's the LED lights. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So when that happens, it's because the solder joints, the solder points are loose or not conducting electricity as they should be, and so all you need to do is resolder them. And there are a total of I think, if I'm not mistaken, well, we'll see in a second, but not knowing how to remove this is what I've done. I've kind of cut those rubber pieces and these 6 points to remove this black piece that houses and that's the rubber gasket that you need to put back together. This little black housing holds the circuit board. This is the circuit board on one side with the solder joints that you'll have to resolder, and then the LED bulbs on this side. There are a total of 11 bulbs, as you can see there, and these 11 bulbs on the back end, they have 4 legs, and so 4 times 11, a total of 44 solder points that you would have to resolder. Maybe not all of them. What I'll do is solder all, but you can skip the ones that look good. Be careful with the little resistors there, not to damage them. I'm using a 5/64 inch bit drill bit. There are 4 points here that you need to drill out. Be careful so that the drill bit doesn't drill all the way through to the other side. It's not very thick, maybe a millimeter or two. So once you go through these 4 points, then you have to cut the 4 wires, 2 on each side, and you would have to replace those wires with new wires and solder them, connect them. But you need to cut those 4 wires. The one that looks light, it's really, the color is kind of purplish white or pinkish white. That's the power line. The brown one is the ground line. So keep that in mind throughout. And so even if you find the housing on eBay, there are some Chinese versions of this. The lights don't look exactly the same, so unless you want to replace both sides, I mean, I don't know how long those will work or last you, but they do sell them brand new from China. It's still not cheap, still in the 150 plus range. So you don't really have much to lose if you're not working before you spend the money to replace them. Buy new or used from the marketplace. It's worth, if you have just a solder gun, some wire, and you'll also need some plastic epoxy. I have that in the beginning of the video in order to reseal the edges to make them waterproof. And those rubber pieces that you cut off, you know, you can just use some JB Weld plastic epoxy, which sits in about 4 or 5 minutes. Get one that sits in 4 or 5 minutes and cures in about 3-4 hours. So really, with some epoxy, solder guns you can get from Amazon nowadays for you can get a whole kit for less than $20. That comes with the wire and cutters and everything else. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm using here. So here's a circuit board. On one side, these solder joints over time, 14 to 21 years, they go bad. And so the legs of the LED bulbs are what you need to solder at the back. And then there are 2 solder points on each end of the long side on each end. That's where the wires that you cut, the electric wires. One comes from the source, and then the other one goes to, there are some other lights that it will go to. You don't need those don't go bad usually. And in this video I'm not showing how to repair those, but usually the problem is with this piece here. And so I've loosely soldered 2 wires on each side, and I'm testing it after I've soldered all the 44 points. And so it was kind of late in the evening, and I didn't want to spend an hour, go to a store, find some wires of the same gauge as this, as the original one. So I found a couple of black and yellow wires in the house that are larger in diameter, and they have a total of, I don't know, 20, 24, 25 strands. The ones, the original ones have 9 strands. I counted them. So what I did was I removed, I'm using basically 9 to 11 strands from my wires to join to the original wires and then solder them. So as long as you're using the same number or more, then you would be okay, especially since this is not the type of light that you leave on all the time. It just turns on when you're turning on the signal, left or right, depending on which side. And you can use some electrical tape or liquid electrical tape over the soldered wires, the connection points. And at each stage kind of tested, you can do that with the battery, a couple more wires coming from the battery's positive and negative terminals, connect them to the power and ground, and make sure that before you move on to the next stage that everything looks good. And so I'm kind of removing and drilling holes through those 4 points where the electrical wires come into this black housing. So as I'm drilling, I'm also removing the old wires that I've cut from both ends of these holes. So I'm using, again, I think 5/64 inch bits, and then a little larger in diameter afterwards, just to fit, just to size my wires. So depending on the size of your wires, you have to test fit them and get the right drill bit to make these holes. So what you do is you solder the new wires to the circuit board, 4 wires, keeping the colors the same for positive and negative sides, and you solder those 2 wires on each side of the circuit board. And I don't think I'm showing that here. I just didn't tape it or record it at the time for some reason. But if you have done any electronics, any soldering work before, this is very easy. Even if you haven't, just watch some YouTube videos. It's really not that hard to do. And like I said before, you don't have anything to lose if this doesn't work. And I can pretty much guarantee you that it will work. If your problem is, if the bulbs are not bad. And these are LED lights; they're not used all the time, so they will not, their lives, the life cycle of these bulbs are quite long, tens of years for the amount of time that they're used, so therefore chances are pretty good that your bulbs are still good. It's just that the soldering points are eroded or bad. So you connect the 2 new wires on the 2 sides of the circuit board. You solder them, and then you drill these holes, and then you snake in the wires connected to the circuit board through these holes to the outside, and that's it. And then you connect them to the wires and the light housing. You see 2 of them there, just to the left of my hand or my fingers on the table. Those 2 wires power the rest of the LED bulbs inside that housing. And I'm not touching those. I tested them, they do work. In your case, you should test them. If they don't work, really no big deal, because what people will see are these 11 LED bulbs. But you can open that up too, and do your own surgery there. You see, I'm using some surgical precision here with, like I said before, I have a lot more restraints in my wires, and I'm just separating more than 9. I think in this case it's 10. The other one was 11, just as many as would fit into the hole of the circuit board, and then cut the part that's not being used. and what remains inside the shield, the wire shield, the cable, that's that doesn't hurt anything. If you have more than 9 wires, depending on how much you cleaned and how you desoldered those holes, and unfortunately I don't show that part either. All you do is you hold your solder guns against the solder gun against those holes, and what's there will melt, and you can just remove it. And if you, these soldering kits on Amazon, they have these suction devices that once you liquefy the old solder, then you can just suck those right out, and so that's how you open up those holes, and then you're putting your new wires in, and then the part I'm not showing here is that I solder that right where I'm turning the wire at right at the hole. I solder them there, and then I cut what the rest of the wire after I've soldered them. So as you remove it, pay attention to where the ground and the power wires go, and kind of replicate that. And it's good to take pictures or video record the removal process, so that you know what to do when you put them back together. But so the concept remains the same, and I hope I can convey that through this video. Now you don't need to necessarily, if it makes it easier, you can just, instead of running the wires through those holes, you can just cut part of the rubber housing and just set the wires in. But I pull here, and I managed to have one of the black wire go through the hole, and as I was pulling, I cut where you see the yellow line is still visible, so I enlarged that hole, and it just came through to the other side. But anyways, here I'm putting it back together without the rubber gasket that I mentioned or showed you in the beginning. Just make sure I'm just test fitting everything. But towards the end, I do put the rubber gasket in. I don't know if I show it or not. You also notice that there is, this water seal that's kind of loose on two sides. That too, you can use the same plastic epoxy to seal it back to the edges of this piece, and you'll see that I do that in a minute. You don't need to be an expert in soldering these electrical lines. Just don't leave any sharp edges. You'll be fine. This will be there's no pushing and pulling going on once you put this in, so this will be a permanent bond. And of course test again, and I'm testing with a power probe that I have. And then before the next step, you want to actually connect it to the plug to make sure you haven't crossed the wires, that everything still works. This loose rubber piece water seal is what I was mentioning before, that you need to epoxy also. So you just insert it and turn the signal to see that this still works, and it does. As you can see, there are about 5 or 6 LED bulbs inside the housing that I'm not touching in this video, and then 41 others. So I've taken everything out, and so I'm kind of showing you, and from this you should get a good idea of how to remove these. I'm putting it back together, but this is the apparatus that allows you to pivot the mirror up and down and left and right, and also I think it heats your mirrors. There are 3 screws that hold this to the frame, and that's how you remove it. And it's and there's one electrical connector, the blue one. And I did it because I wanted to make sure. Well, first I was curious to see what's there, and to make sure that none of the wires were cut before I went to work on the LED lights. So I'd removed this, and I had noticed that there was a cut in one of the wires, I mean in the shielding. So I put electrical tape around it. You can see that closest to the camera right now. This is a T10 Torx bit, and I'm not looking, so that's why I'm going all around the screw. And one more electrical connector for the mirror itself. The two rusty looking orange colored squares, that's what provides the heat to the mirrors. So this mirror is held to the unit with that one spring on top, and then there are those two rounded brackets, for lack of a better word, that go on the inside. So you put those brackets inside, and then you press down. The way you remove it is you lift it up. Okay, so this is the one that I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that you use a screwdriver. In some models it's in the bottom, some models on the top of the unit. This is the one that you kind of pivot in and out. And so in order to remove the housing in the beginning, when you put it back in, you don't have to do anything with that. So here I've applied epoxy all over, and in those 6 points where I had cut the rubber, and all around it, and also the water seal. So it doesn't matter how it looks on the inside. As you'll see in a second, it will look perfectly fine and just like before on the outside, because all of this is on the inside. And you put it in. To remove it, it's just the reverse of this in the beginning. You press it in towards the inside of the housing. And so as you can see, you cannot see any of the epoxy or the dirty work on the inside. And there are two screws that hold this to the housing that you have to remove in the beginning. And then you press it in. Now I ran out of battery, and I'm not showing you the very last part of it as I move it in, but unfortunately. But no big deal. You just press it in, and it goes all the way. You do it carefully. But that's it. I hope you find the video useful, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.